So welcome to Peer Resource Sharing with Connecting Communities in the Americas and our discussion on vital signs. If you haven't done so already in the chat, go ahead and put your organization, your country, maybe the state or province you're in as well. And just to talk a little bit about vital signs from Canada. So the Community Foundations of Canada network really has promoted this in that country. Most, as I understand it, most community foundations in Canada, or a good majority, do vital signs research regularly. And they are very much the experts on creative ways of doing it and how to use it in their communities. I have learned also that there is branding behind it. And so Mexico went into an agreement with Canada to be able to use that branding and help them with the communications of vital signs as well. But essentially, it is based on these choosing indicators of community well-being. So there's a broad array of what that could be, and each foundation really decides which indicators they want to focus on, if it's economic mobility, if it's access to healthcare, anything. This is essentially the decision of the foundation itself. They are often and very well connected to the Sustainable Development Goals, so you'll hear a little bit about that possibly. A lot of the research is really trying to bring together data that already exists on a country level, down to province or state, maybe even to county or municipality. But there's also this exciting component called vital conversations, which is really balancing the quantitative with the qualitative research and having these conversations within the community about what people, individuals and families are experiencing on these various aspects of community well-being. And from these vital conversations, you're also able to identify some of the gaps that maybe the existing data doesn't show us yet. And then, this leads to all kinds of possibilities. What do we do with this data? What do we do with the vital signs reports? And we'll learn a little bit today from our fellow community foundations, like what it's meant for them to be working with vital signs over time. So we really understand that on the call today, there are foundations or people who maybe this is brand new for, but there also might be some who are very experienced, some who are kind of in the middle with this. And these are our speakers today. I want to make sure I move this over. And so I wanted you to physically see where our speakers are coming from today. Lynn is up in Ontario. Juan Manuel is in central to northern Mexico, up in Coahuila, the state of Coahuila. Camila is down on a beautiful island called Florianópolis in southeast Brazil. Alec Gorinsky is in Nebraska, central United States, and Claudia Villa is in central part of Mexico. So you'll be hearing from each of them today in their own languages as well. I'm going to stop sharing at this moment. Does anyone have any questions before we begin? Is everyone on the interpretation? You're doing well with that? Okay, good. All right. So let's start with our first panel. And if you could just kind of wave, Juan Manuel and Claudia Villa as well will be in the first panel. And if you put your view, if you go to view on my screen, it's top right-hand corner. You can use speaker view as well if you want to see, you know, a larger picture of the person who's speaking. So again, I'll be asking the questions in English, but Juan Manuel and Claudia, you can respond in Spanish. That's just fine. Juan Manuel, I know you're very comfortable in both languages. Which language do you prefer to speak?
I'm okay with either one. Like if it's easier for people, if it's in English, I can do English. It's fine for me.
Okay, how about if you respond in English and Claudia responds in Spanish? Is that okay?
Okay, great. It sounds great for me.
Okay, good. So the first question is, you both did vital signs now for the first time. Why? Why did you choose vital signs? And who is your population of focus? And we'll start with Claudia, please. She'll be speaking in Spanish.
Muchas gracias, Lisa. ¿Sí me escuchan? Bien, pues cuando el primer grupo de fundaciones comunitarias que participó en este ejercicio de signos vitales presentó los resultados que obtuvieron, nos pareció muy interesante justamente cómo pudieron abordar los temas principales de su comunidad y cómo esto generaba información valiosa para las fundaciones comunitarias y les permitía tener intervenciones más completas. En un momento nos pareció que justo la metodología que ofrecía Signos Vitales nos permitiría ampliar el conocimiento que teníamos de estas comunidades en donde ya incidíamos a través de el trabajo con otras organizaciones de la sociedad civil. Ellos implementan proyectos y nosotros los financiamos. Entonces, justamente participar en este proceso se alineaba mucho con la estrategia de investigación que tiene Fundación Merced Querétaro y además nos permitía profundizar en estas intervenciones que nosotros ya teníamos. En un ejercicio de planeación estratégica, decidimos incluir un objetivo para potencializar nuestra naturaleza como fundación comunitaria y conocer justamente de viva voz las necesidades y las problemáticas que las personas que habitan en estas comunidades pues viven día a día. Para poder focalizar nuestros esfuerzos y hacerlos más estratégicos en la identificación de posibles soluciones para estas problemáticas. En este sentido, nosotros en Fundación Merced Querétaro definimos dos líneas de investigación: el tema de empleabilidad y seguridad alimentaria con grupos de mujeres y jóvenes de algunos de los municipios con mayor rezago en el estado, que fueron los municipios de Querétaro, Tolimán y Colón.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to actually pass on the moderator position to Minerva. We talked about her doing this and then I completely forgot. So Minerva, you'll continue after Juan Manuel shares his perspective on why they did vital signs and their population of focus. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you, Minerva. Well, the answer is why not? It was very easy for us. We wanted to have that data. I'm always saying here in Coahuila, we do not have enough CSOs participating actively in building a greater community. And we didn't have the data or the resources to be able to go with our social investors and to go with a private industry or the government and say, this is what we need to focus on, this is what we need to invest, and not to create something that doesn't have any motivation for our community to grow up. And when I saw the results for the first time, for the first vital signs that they did in Mexico, I knew that we needed to be part of it. It was fundamentally to get that funding for Fundación Merced Coahuila to be able to advance in their strategic planning, as Claudia said. It is trying to build something much stronger with the enough resources, and I'm sorry to repeat it, but with the data. We cannot talk just by talking. We need to be able to say, hey, this is my vital signs. I work with this organizations, and this is what they need, what they are craving for. Our beneficiaries are seeking this. This is not something that I just invent for myself or to promote my own cause. So that's the main reason that we decided to get Vital Signs moving on here in Coahuila.
Gracias, Juan Manuel. And I am going to switch over to Spanish just to also make it more balanced and get those questions out there, but I'll switch to the Spanish channel. Entonces, bueno, gracias por darnos ese contexto de dónde salió esa necesidad o esa inquietud de hacer signos vitales. Y la siguiente pregunta es un poquito como entraron con estas expectativas y con estos objetivos diseñados, y quisiera saber si encontraron algo que les sorprendió, que dijeron, esto no lo teníamos planeado como consecuencia de signos vitales, pero es algo que nos está dejando algo, o que está cambiando nuestros procesos, nuestros acercamientos, nuestras maneras de aliarnos, cualquier cosa que sea diferente a lo que tenían propuesto desde el inicio. Si quieres empezar, Claudia.
Claro que sí, gracias, Mine. Sí, por supuesto. Además, obviamente, como les comentaba, esta posibilidad de acercarnos por primera vez directo como Fundación Merced Querétaro y no a través de otras organizaciones, fue justamente la necesidad de promover intervenciones más largas, de promover intervenciones que además contemplen acciones de continuidad una vez concluido el proyecto, porque una de las cosas que mencionaban en estas comunidades es que llegan intervenciones muy interesantes, pero que al final son intervenciones muy breves, ¿no? Sujetas siempre solo al financiamiento, y los financiamientos en México tienden a ser a corto plazo. Entonces, nos ha dado como esta reflexión o esta posibilidad de reflexionar para financiar intervenciones más largas y, como decía, que justo contemplen otras acciones de continuidad y, por supuesto, que además promuevan la participación de las personas que habitan en estas comunidades.
Gracias, Claudia. Adelante, Fernando.
Thank you, Minerva. For us, I'm going to give a little bit of context of Coahuila. Coahuila is a north state near Texas, is one of the biggest states here in Mexico, and we do not have a lot of population. But we also have a lot of industry over here. Chrysler is over here, General Motors. Tesla is going to be in Monterrey, which is like a 30-minute drive from where I live. So we do have a lot of industry. That doesn't mean that we have a lot of social investors over here in Coahuila. And because the state is so big, everyone is focused on their own region, and we do not have like this solidarity built within CSOs. And we also do not have the capabilities or the knowledge on how to implement the project. So our main focus or goal while doing Vital Signs was we need to know what the beneficiaries want. What are the main needs? What do we need to work as CSOs to resolve or to help them build something stronger, especially in a big state as Coahuila, where we don't have enough social participation or CSOs or whatever. So having said that, we decided to meet with a whole bunch of CSOs, with 12, and we created this alliance. And that's how we start promoting this Vital Signs reports and our conversations. Also, we wanted to have enough impact and support that other people are going to look back and see that we're doing great things over here, and not just getting the data for getting the data. We want to work with that data. We want to do something. We want to create this alliance that really works to help put things in motion. I don't know if I'm explaining myself correctly, but we wanted to create this group, the support group of NCOs, CSOs, of NGOs that really works within that community for that community.
Gracias, Juan Manuel. Y quiero nada más hacer aquí una aclaración, no sé cómo se está traduciendo exactamente, pero CSO, o en español decimos OSCs, organizaciones de sociedad civil, o Civil Society Organizations, para que los acrónimos no nos dejen atorados. Y sí, creo que algo que tiene interesante del reporte de signos vitales de ambas organizaciones, de Merced Querétaro y Merced Coahuila, es que ustedes trabajan como en ese segundo piso, ¿no? Entonces mucho tenía que ver en cómo se acercaban a organizaciones de la sociedad civil para acercarse a la comunidad. Era como un proceso de dos pasos y creo que eso ha dejado cosas interesantes en lo que están haciendo. La siguiente pregunta es un poquito si esta era como qué cosas les sorprendió, qué cosas buenas, nuevas, diferentes les ha dejado. También preguntarles cuáles fueron los mayores retos, sobre todo sabiendo que esta era como su primera implementación. Incluso en algún momento platicamos que para ambos era como un piloto, no hicieron todo el estado, sino hicieron ciertas áreas del estado. Entonces, pero ¿cuáles serían los retos que encontraron y cómo les dieron la vuelta o qué harían diferente para la próxima vez y que ya no fueran retos?
Sí, comienzo si estás de acuerdo, Juan Manuel. Bien, pues tuvimos muchos desafíos durante este ejercicio. Primero, durante el diseño de la investigación, el mayor fue justamente cómo acotábamos la investigación, cómo seleccionábamos estas comunidades donde queríamos realizar el diagnóstico, porque el estado de Querétaro es muy grande y definitivamente no podríamos cubrirlo todo. Y además, qué ejes temáticos íbamos a investigar un poco más, ¿no? Ahí, en este sentido, la orientación de Comunalia para delimitar justamente esta investigación y cómo íbamos a seleccionar estos ejes temáticos fue de gran utilidad. Como mencionaba anteriormente, al final seleccionamos los temas de seguridad alimentaria y empleabilidad, porque eran ejes de intervención en los que ya veníamos trabajando desde nuestro programa de inversión social a través del financiamiento de proyectos de otras organizaciones. Delimitar ya las comunidades fue más sencillo, considerando todos estos datos estadísticos que ya existen previamente, y considerando criterios como el rezago económico, educativo, y que además teníamos incidencia previa en estos municipios y en estas comunidades. Otro gran desafío fue justo cómo devolvíamos la información a estas comunidades para que para ellos también fuera información de utilidad y que pudieran hacer uso también ellos de estos hallazgos, ¿no? Que pudieran entender también cómo podían usar esta información para otras intervenciones, pero definitivamente el reto más grande que vamos a tener fue justo o será siempre el seguimiento que dé Fundación Merced Querétaro para generar otras alianzas y dar continuidad, ¿no? a los hallazgos de esta investigación, y diseñando en conjunto intervenciones que sí respondan a los intereses, a las necesidades y a las solicitudes que las personas de estas comunidades hacen.
Gracias, Claudia.
Adelante, Juan Manuel.
And sorry, Minerva. As Claudia said, it was a challenge. It was a new challenge. I wasn't expecting that. I'm not going to repeat because it was the same, you know, it's a big state and how we need to work within our own region. it was very difficult for us to get organization to trust us, even though that we work with them since the 2000s. We were starting an electoral process, and so when we reach out to them to participate in this vital signs diagnosis, the first thing that they ask is, which party are we going to have a benefit if we answer this poll, if we answer this survey? And it's not about parties, it's because we want to know what you need, what we need to do to be a better community over here, you know? And so that was a challenge. And even though that we work in just a very small region here in Coahuila, it is still a big state. So being able to get people from point A to point B and to have this conversation with Minerva over there at Comunalia, which they were amazing over there, and they were very comprehensive about the things that we were experiencing over here. Well, that was also a challenge. And we also have, we experienced some changes in Canada. So we weren't getting the feedback at the same time, and we needed to deal with our consultants that were doing the investigation over there at the field. And some of the data wasn't the same data that we were expecting. It was different. And we needed to change some of our investigation over here because it was not the thing that we were expecting. We know that we didn't have enough participation over here, but then we see what they want and what they need and how they are and their knowledge about being part of the civil society community, and they weren't enough. So we still have a lot of things to do, and that's why we decided to create this alliance to start building capacities also for the CSOs over here in Mexico and start working with them to impact our community. Back to Minerva.
Thank you very much.
Gracias, Juan Manuel.
Yeah, it's all the time we have for the first panel, unfortunately. Thank you, Minerva. But thank you so much for bringing that context in about Mexico, about your specific states, and really trying to figure out what vital signs could mean for your, not only for your organization, but also for the ones that you work with. That's great. We're going to go on to the second panel before we have questions. So at the end of the second panel, we'll open for some time of questions, and then we're going into breakout sessions. So there'll be plenty of time for you if you have questions, but also feel free to write questions in the chat that you have for any of the panelists. They can also be responding to those in the chat if we don't have time to actually talk about them together. So now I'd like to continue with Lynn, Camila, and Alec. Can you kind of say hello so that we know who you are? There we go. Where's Camila? There you are. Okay, good. Good. So these are three organizations that we've learned about who have been doing vital signs for a while. And the funny thing with Alec is from the Lincoln Community Foundation of Nebraska, is that Alec, you said you hadn't even heard of the Canadian Vital Signs Project. Is that right?
That's right. It was your outreach that introduced us to not only that, but this really fantastic network of community foundations across the Americas. Yeah,
so you have been doing this now for a few years in partnership locally, and gave it the same name. I mean, Vital Signs isn't like a super miracle name. It makes sense to call collecting data on community well-being vital signs, but you've also been able to continue it for over several years. So can you talk to us a little bit about the partnerships that you have going on so that you're able to produce this study? And also, what do you think the most important outcomes have been over time?
Sure. Well, and while we were unfamiliar with the Canadian community foundations, what I have learned, and my colleague on this call with me, Michelle, who's been around, I'm relatively new to my role, 18 months or so, so this predates me. But we did learn of work being done in Miami at the Miami Community Foundation. So they very well may have, it's like a game of telephone, I suppose. So, and I think that's where we got the name. But the idea is simple, and a similar philosophical approach to everyone that is here and has done this work before is the socioeconomic report card of our community. And almost most importantly, and I'll elaborate on this a little bit, is a consistent and fact-driven narrative about the current state of our community. And so you talked about partnerships, and that is a fundamental, that's what we'll specifically speak to here. And the partnerships that we have are twofold. One is Lincoln Vital Signs is not necessarily a product of the Lincoln Community Foundation. It is a product of a consortium of, the number isn't precise, but over a dozen other foundations that too rely on a consistent, fact-driven narrative and set of facts around the socioeconomic state of our community. So we're one of many funders. We're one of many that use the information for our own strategy, that expect and partner with community organizations in our community to they themselves rely on the information to both appeal for funding and to guide their own strategies. So we are one of many funders, and that is one thing that is essential to keep this going for, you alluded to a number of years now. It's been, next year will be 10 years of 4 or 5 reports produced. We do so about every other year. Right now, we're in the midst of producing a special report on racial inequities in our community. Some of our data is disaggregated by race, not all of it. And so we're being really intentional about trying to use data to inform the narrative about inequities that exist in our community. So that'll be a 5th or 6th report. And then, of course, next year, we'll be on to our back to our biannual cycle with our 2024 report, which will be 6 or 7. So it's those funding partners that that see value in it, that rely on it. Admittedly, we have lost a couple of funders in the past couple of years, and not because of anything controversial. Some of them have just said, "Are we done with this yet?" And apparently, we haven't done a good enough job of educating them on the reality that, communities are constantly changing, and so we should have a constant update of what our community looks like. So that's a bit of a battle we faced this last time around, and but that's okay. Other foundations and ourselves have stepped up to fill the gap. The other partnership that I'll emphasize then here is our partnership with the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, which is our local land grant university in our community, and specifically a division they have called the Public Policy Center that focuses on civic work in particular. And they have been an essential partner since the get-go, essential because they conduct the research. We are not capable at the Community Foundation. We don't have the capacity to do this work. They have a team of, 4 or 5 researchers that lead this effort, that identify the data sources. It's not net new research, much like has been talked about here. It's about existing data sources and piecing it together to paint a standard picture. And they're the ones that conduct the research and draw the conclusions and present the information, lead the effort to bring awareness of the conclusions to our community. And we are a partner in that, as are the other foundations. So, if those who are considering doing this work or in the middle of doing this work thinking, I can't keep going, this is a lot, and we actually use a grant to fund the relationship with the University of Nebraska Public Policy Center. So it's not an operating expense. We didn't have to add headcount or anything of that nature. And they really own the project. They take a lot of pride in the project. And that has been essential.
Yeah, that's really a neat way to kind of not feel as if the community foundation is solely responsible for this. And it's obviously in the interest of the university and their public policy center to really be abreast of this data and be part of doing that. Alec, can you tell us a little bit about Vital Conversation? Oh, you have, put it this way, have you, whoops, excuse me, Miriam, you need to put your,
She did.
yeah, there you go, thank you. Alec, have you had community conversations?
Yes, we have had community conversations. We call them community connections.
There you
It was only again through my conversation with you did we learn about the term Vital Conversations, and I know it's branded, that brand is owned by someone else, but what a cool name. But yes, we rely on that qualitative dialogue to help further inform our community about and give context to the challenges that exist that we become aware of as a result of Lincoln Vital Signs. This sounds silly. Our community was largely unaware of the poverty that existed in our community until Lincoln Vital Signs originally in 2014. Now, certainly there were nonprofit organizations and those that have lived experiences that are certainly aware of the poverty in our community. But as a business community and among a group of community leaders, it was largely unknown, or the scale of it was not known, I should say. And it's because of not only the data, but the subsequent conversations to bring that data to individuals and give it context and provide examples is what really has helped us realize our goal of a consistent fact-driven narrative in our community. And those happen regularly and will continue to be a part of the effort. And it really puts us in a position, while it's not our product, it's many foundations and funders, it does put us in a position to be a technical expert on challenges that exist in our community, and that really ingratiates us with other collaborators, donors, whatever the case may be.
Thank you so much. That was very insightful. Camila is from Brazil, and Camila, your question is referring to the fact that ICOM, which is the Instituto Comunitario Grande de Florianópolis in Brazil, ICOM has done vital signs that are very thematic based. So you've done vital signs on specific populations such as youth in your community and more recently immigrants in your community. How have you involved local nonprofit organizations and local government in preparing for the study and for following up with the results?
Obrigada, Elisa. Boa tarde a todos. Aqui no Brasil são 3 horas da tarde, né? Então, gostaria de desejar uma boa tarde. Então, aqui no ICOM, né, nós somos uma fundação comunitária, uma das primeiras do Brasil, e realizando sinais vitais nós já realizamos desde 2008. Essa aqui foi a primeira versão de 2008, e essa foi a última que a Elisa citou sobre a população migrante. O ICOM fez diagnósticos gerais com dados da cidade até 2015, e a partir de 2015 nós passamos a fazer diagnósticos, né, as pesquisas dos sinais vitais com populações específicas. E em relação à pergunta, né, como a gente envolve as organizações da sociedade civil e o poder público aqui local no diagnóstico, na verdade nós enxergamos os sinais vitais. O produto final são os dados, né? Mas muito conta o processo da coleta dos dados, e isso influencia diretamente, né, os resultados do diagnóstico. Então, quando nós vamos fazer os sinais vitais, uma das primeiras coisas que nós fizemos na pesquisa, nós mapeamos os atores interessados na temática em específico. E, a partir daí, nós envolvemos eles no processo da estruturação da pesquisa. Nos sinais vitais, migração internacional foi um tema que o ICOM trabalhou a primeira vez, então esse passo foi muito importante para que a gente conseguisse desenvolver a pesquisa, né, dos sinais vitais. Então, nós fazemos o mapeamento desses atores, nós conversamos com esses atores, apresentamos a metodologia dos sinais vitais, apresentamos a proposta da pesquisa, e a partir daí, né, com essas conversas com os atores e também especialistas nas temáticas, a gente consegue identificar quais são as principais demandas, os principais desafios. E isso ajuda muito, né, no engajamento deles no processo da pesquisa, porque as pessoas se sentem parte do processo de pesquisa, quando elas são envolvidas na parte estratégica. Então, o que nós adotamos, né, nesses sinais vitais de migração internacional, que foi o último que nós realizamos, nós fizemos uma oficina participativa, que está prevista na metodologia dos sinais vitais, no processo antes, né? Então, no momento onde a gente foi desenhar a estratégia de pesquisa, que significa quais dados nós vamos coletar, quais são os pontos que precisam de atenção, quais são os pontos mais urgentes, o que o campo que trabalha com essa temática precisa de informação para poder avançar na garantia de direitos dessa população. Então, essas estratégias de pesquisa foram definidas de forma colaborativa, participativa, com as organizações da sociedade civil que atendem aqui em Florianópolis diretamente a população migrante. Então, a partir daí, a estrutura da pesquisa dos sinais vitais foi definida. E nós fazemos essas checagens, né, com as organizações e com especialistas durante todo o processo de pesquisa. Nós fizemos visitas presenciais, né, para validação dessa estratégia de pesquisa, porque ao longo da pesquisa, uma pesquisa foi um pouco mais de um ano, então, à medida quando a gente ia conhecendo os dados, a gente ia traçando alguns próximos passos, né, de coleta, e a gente ia sempre validando com esses atores. Isso ajuda com que a pesquisa faça sentido para quem de fato, né, vai estar trabalhando com a temática e para que a gente consiga de fato coletar dados que ajudem, né, influenciem ações tanto da sociedade civil quanto do governo local para determinada população. E nós também, com os detentores dos dados, aqui no Brasil nós temos, claro, muitos avanços em relação à transparência dos dados, né, mas ainda há muito que caminhar. E uma das estratégias que nós adotamos aqui no Brasil nós visitamos os detentores dos dados, né? Então, são aqueles funcionários que trabalham com o governo, que têm o dado que muitas vezes não estão disponíveis, né, para a população em geral, de forma online, e nós estabelecemos essa relação para conseguir os dados. E é interessante também manter, né, cultivar essa relação. Nós não finalizamos o contato quando nós conseguimos os dados. Quando a gente trata os dados, quando a gente monta um gráfico, quando a gente monta uma tabela, nós vamos de novo para os atores que são detentores dos dados, mostramos os dados e perguntamos, né, se a gente poderia, de repente, coletar outra coisa, ou a gente poderia ter alguma outra questão que precisaria ajustar. Então, acho que a grande essência dos sinais vitais aqui para a gente no ICOM é esse processo de articulação, né? E depois, quando nós temos os dados coletados, nós fazemos as oficinas de contextualização dos dados também. A gente utiliza essa metodologia também dos sinais vitais, esse passo. E a partir daí a gente tem isso, a gente tem uma estratégia de pesquisa montada colaborativamente com as organizações de sociedade civil e com os especialistas das áreas. Nós temos os dados coletados de forma participativa, né, com os atores que detêm esses dados, eles avaliam os dados que nós também tratamos, depois que temos esse momento dos dados, nós contextualizamos os dados com esses especialistas e com as pessoas que participaram do processo de disponibilização dos dados, e aí no final, no dia do lançamento, é muito natural. Como as pessoas foram envolvidas durante todo o processo da pesquisa, nos checkpoints da pesquisa, elas querem ver o resultado, porque elas sentem que elas fizeram parte do processo de coleta, de tratamento. E então é muito natural, quando nós chegamos no final do processo, as pessoas, tanto as organizações quanto o poder público detentor dos dados, estarem com a gente, né? Estarem no lançamento e, posterior, utilizarem o relatório para pensar em novos projetos, para pensar em política pública, porque eles participaram desse processo, tanto de desenho quanto de coleta e tratamentos dos dados. Então, de fato, para a gente, como a gente mantém essa relação é dessa forma, é mapeando os atores e envolvendo eles no processo. Eu vou compartilhar no link, o link do nosso relatório digital, e agora aqui no ICOM nós estamos passando por um novo processo, vou aproveitar a oportunidade para compartilhar. Nós estamos construindo um painel online que condensa os indicadores coletados pelos últimos sinais vitais do ICOM. O nosso sonho para o futuro é que a gente consiga cada vez mais alimentar esse sistema e que a gente possa migrar, né, para uma forma 100% digital. Eu vou compartilhar aqui o link com vocês. Quem puder conhecer também está sendo um trabalho bem legal que estamos desenvolvendo relacionado aos sinais vitais.
Thank you so much. And that's a fascinating idea, making a phone app where people could also access that information. Thank you, Camila. So Lynn is from the Muskoka Community Foundation. You're in a small rural region, a small community or small area and very rural region of Ontario. And you are only a part-time executive director, and yet your foundation has managed to continue with Vital Signs as well over the years. I think you said every other year. So could you share about how you've been able to make that possible, Lynn? And who is using the information in your region? In our conversation, I found that very interesting.
Sure. Thanks so much, Lisa. And first, I'd like to apologize. I've seemed very distracted. We've had some severe weather suddenly come through, so I'm just watching out the window in case I need to take action.
And Lynn, just slow it down just a tad for the interpreters. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for the reminder.
Yes.
Yes. So Lisa, as you mentioned, we are a small community foundation. We are in central Ontario, which is known throughout Canada and the US as cottage country, kind of a playground for those who have lots of resources. And so we decided to do a Vital Signs report in 2017 because we really felt there was a disconnect between our community and those who come to visit our community and spend time in our community. And so we were hoping the report would kind of be able to kind of bridge that gap of knowledge about the place that is so special to so many people. So we started with the Vital Conversations. We knew our community well as a community foundation. We thought we understood the needs and the issues that were facing our community, but we wanted to really find out who held the data, who could help us. And we're in a very unique situation in that our district, which is comprised of 6 municipalities and 2 First Nation communities, is also serviced by regionally by other ministries. So funding that comes in to address employment might be coupled with a district or a region to our east. Likewise, our health unit, which oversees, general population health, comes from the south of us with another county called Simcoe. And so finding one place to find data to kind of explain our community to others was very challenging. And so we set out to host Vital Conversations over a 4-month period, just to identify who had data about our community, who was doing that collection, and how might we use that and blend those different data sources together. So we started doing that. One of the challenges is that we are small. I'm part-time and I'm the only staff person. So we had to decide how we were going to balance creating a report that was meaningful, that was accessible to people, and do it in a way that didn't put too much stress on my resources in doing the other day-to-day things that are required of a community foundation. So it took some careful planning. We took things very slowly in the beginning. The Vital Conversations happened in 2017. We started to identify those themes that we thought were most important for people to engage with. And then from there, we started reaching out to different community organizations, community service organizations, to learn about the work they were doing. Again, that data piece, which has been a theme throughout, data being so very important when working on a vital signs report. And in 2018, we felt we were ready to start compiling that information into a report. We decided that we could only do a report every other year, and even that sometimes is a bit taxing. We're due to have our 2023 report come out in the fall, and while we have an idea, or I have an idea of where we're going to go with that, there's been other competing things happening in the day-to-day operations that have prevented me from really digging into the work that needs to happen. So it does cause a bit of stress at times. And as we're getting ready to release our third vital signs report, the community is asking for it. They're looking for it. They want to know when the next one's coming out. So there is this, bit of pressure now that we get a report out, because we know people are wanting to engage with it. And to your question, Lisa, about who's engaging with our report, initially we thought this would be a report that we would give to our current donors or future donors, that it would be used more broadly by the community. But what we found is that it's used by those individuals that are contributing the data to the report. Many community service organizations that serve Muskoka regularly seek funding to continue their operations. And they use the most current vital signs report as a way of populating the information that's required in those funding applications. And so we find that the community service organizations are using the report more heavily and on a regular basis. Even the district of Muskoka, that is our main data source, we have two tiers of governments in Muskoka, they being the top tier, and they are they contribute probably about 90% of the data that goes into the report, and they themselves request about 50 to 80 reports once they're published, so each department can have them, again, to streamline, I believe it was Camilla that said, right, having who has the data, who can share it, how is it accessed and translated back and forth. And so we find that the municipalities are using it for their own reporting back to various levels of provincial government, and also making funding requests as well. Yeah.
And did you mention to me, Lynn, that some of the schools were using it too?
Yeah, that's fairly new, but we have 4 high schools in Muskoka, and one of the high schools has adopted it in their social studies class. They have two sets that are held in their library so that a classroom can check them out at any time. And so they've engaged with the report in a really interesting way. Their teacher made it part of an assignment. They had to use the vital signs report when kind of reporting back on issues that they thought were affecting their community. And that same high school will reach out to me regularly to learn more about the vital signs report, as they identify charities in their community that they want to work with, or issues they feel they as a class or they as a group of young volunteers can tackle. So yeah, it's been interesting who sees the report and who uses it.
Right. So as a former teacher, I just thought that I was a social studies teacher, and I thought, yay for that teacher. That's fantastic. And to expose kids to this data about their own community is really powerful. Thank you so much, Camilla, Lynn, and Alec, for sharing about your bit broader experience with vital signs. We want to open it to questions for a few minutes. I'm going to change my screen back to a gallery look. Does anyone have questions for any of the panelists, or just generally? Feel free to raise your hand. And if others on the call, if I don't see someone, be sure to let me know, or you can put a question in the chat. Kind of what's going on in your mind before we go into breakout sessions to talk about this in small groups. Does anyone have a question? Yeah, Minerva.
Yo, más que una pregunta, como resaltar esto que me encantó escuchar de Camila y que, bueno, Claudia lo mencionó como reto, pero también Alec y Lynn hablan como de que como es un proceso, para que no sea extractivo, tienen que regresar a la comunidad, ¿no? Entonces, todo el proceso de signos vitales no nada más es la información de la comunidad para generar un reporte, sino cómo regresas esa información de manera útil y efectiva a la comunidad, a las organizaciones, pero también a la gente, a la misma que te da. Yo he tenido esa experiencia con temas de cosas de conservación biológica, pero llegan de repente los científicos y hacen montones de preguntas y luego se van y nunca regresan a dar los resultados y genera desconfianza, ¿no? Entonces, que el regresar a presentar resultados y a tener esas conversaciones después, también es un proceso que ayuda a acercar y a generar confianza, que creo que es, no sé si Juan Manuel igual nos pueda platicar tantito, pero sé que es una cosa que ellos vivieron, que había una desconfianza de entrada, ¿no? Hacia sociedad civil en el estado o en las localidades donde trabajaron, y no sé si el hacer signos vitales y regresar esta información, ¿crees que de alguna manera ha ayudado a esa percepción que tiene la comunidad y las organizaciones acerca de ustedes y de la sociedad civil en general?
Sí, definitivamente. Do I need to answer in Spanish or English?
As you wish, just let the interpreters know.
Okay, I'm gonna answer in English. Yes, definitely. It's part of a process, and I know that we are still earning the trust and confidence of the different NGOs that are over here in the south part of the state. Even though that we work with them, we've been working with them for so many years. I know for a fact that creating this alliance and working with these organizations on a project, because I didn't say that, Lisa, we did create this alliance to promote Vital Signs, but we are also doing events, and we mobilized more than 400 volunteers in an event over here in April. So working and giving results is the way that we're trying to gain confidence and trust again in civil society organizations. And for people in America or in different parts of the world, you need to understand that here in Mexico, being civil society right now with our current governors, especially with in the federal state, it is very risky, and it is very costly also. It's not, they're not incentivizing the creation of more civil society organizations. Our federal government want to create this way of working where they do all of this type of work, and civil society and CSOs are the enemy of the government. So that's something that we also need to put in context. So gaining that trust is still a process, but definitely having this data and having this organization working with it within this data and having events that have been successful is the way that we're trying to regain that trust that we lost.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. This whole question about who has access to the data, who is the guardian of the data, and trying to democratize that as much as possible. We have an interesting question here in the chat from Kate. When surveying your community, how do you ensure there is equitable access to the survey to ensure data collected is representative of the community? And so did any of your organizations actually put a survey out to the community? If not from the speakers, is there anyone else on the call who has actually sent out surveys in the community? And if so, how did you ensure sort of equity and access to that survey? Can somebody respond to that?
Lisa, I can just add that we considered doing a survey in the beginning, and for the reason that Kate brought up, we chose not to, only because how would we ensure that if we were you know, publishing any of those results, that we could ensure accuracy, or that you know, everybody had an equal chance to have access. So we don't personally here, and I don't see that we would, not to the broader community, perhaps to some of the community service organizations, very simply to find out, is there a particular issue or theme that we should be thinking about and that we should be seeking data for, but not in terms of actual data collection that we would reproduce.
Okay, thank you.
I have a response. We have not officially surveyed. This year, as I mentioned, we are doing a Vital Signs report on racial inequities and disparities in our community. And as a part of that, we are doing what are called, data walks. We have done 3 with 1 more planned. Data walks is a best practice of the Urban Institute, I believe. And the idea is to bring some of the data into the community and have individuals with lived experiences provide their the response to that information. I remember at one of the data walks I volunteered at, and I stood at a poster board that explained low birth weight and the disparities in low birth weight among different racial groups. And individuals that would come by would explain to me their experiences or their cultural norms that would maybe explain that, providing information that if you'll remember, we partner with the University of Nebraska, information that those researchers would not necessarily have, but for the data walks. Admittedly, those data walks were intended to be in and with the community. Admittedly, attendance was we were happy with, but not, you know, thousands of people by any means. So there's room to grow there.
Right. And often, I mean, a partnership with a university is probably the best bet towards, like, if they wanted to take it on as a research project where they could actually do a random study, that would be a way to do that. And otherwise, I think just really being open and transparent about the fact that, you know, we sent out so many surveys, this is how many we got back. This study does not represent the entire population. Stating that in your study, but also working with partners to do everything possible to get those surveys out, of course. Claudia.
Gracias, Lisa. También nosotros utilizamos algunos instrumentos, algunos cuestionarios que nos permitían conocer un poquito más acerca de las necesidades de estas personas sobre seguridad alimentaria, ¿no? Sobre el acceso a los alimentos, a la variedad de alimentos, su preocupación incluso en torno a esto. Y los investigadores que nos apoyaron también en este ejercicio también fueron justo muy cuidadosos al momento de compartir la información, que si bien no era una muestra significativa de toda la comunidad, las personas que asistían nos compartían lo siguiente, ¿no? Entonces creo que en ese sentido fue de gran utilidad también contar con esta información sí cuantitativa, pero que también ellos iban narrando durante estas conversaciones vitales.
Thank you. Does anyone have something that you'd like to share from your group? What have you been talking about? Or do you have any new new ideas that you're going back with that you'd like to think about?
Pues en nuestro grupo Claudia estuvo súper aplicada y puso en el chat otros usos de signos vitales. Claudia, ¿no quieres compartir?
Sí, y gracias, Isabel. Justo estuvimos mencionando, reflexionando de experiencias previas, ¿no? Nos tocó con otras fundaciones que ya habían desarrollado este ejercicio de signos vitales y hablábamos que este reporte nos permite también diseñar planeación estratégica para la organización, para la fundación comunitaria. Por supuesto, diseñar intervenciones posteriores que respondan a los hallazgos de estos signos, de estos diagnósticos participativos. Y que además, justo Isabel mencionaba que es necesario mantener vigente, ¿no? O sea, no dejar que haya solo un ejercicio de signos vitales, sino que haya otros ejercicios posteriores para que no se pierdan estos esfuerzos y sigamos respondiendo a las necesidades de ese contexto. Y que además también nos permite en algún momento convertirse en referentes territoriales al generar información de interés sobre estas necesidades. Y por último, también nos permite generar alianzas y también involucrar a otros agentes que son corresponsables en la solución de las problemáticas de estas comunidades.
Thank you. Lynn, was it you that was telling me that you have used the same format of the design and then would fill in the new information? I can't remember if you mentioned that or not.
That's an approach that we take to, you know, once we develop, and there was two reasons. One is the familiarity of the report that the viewer has, and so when they look at, you know, the newest report, they know what to expect, and they're not having to reinterpret data and information. Also for ease for me to populate a new vital signs report. It's easy to take the report and the older data to our data holders and say, can we update this? Here's what we need to update. So that's one of the reasons we do it that way, for sure.
So this idea of either in-house within the community foundation or with whoever is helping you with the design, maybe just keeping that access to the design program, if especially cost is an issue for paying for a completely new design for a completely new project. Anne-Marie, yes.
Thanks so much, Lisa. It's been a really great conversation. There's so much discussion of community data. I'm curious how any of you are sharing your own internal data, such as your own grant making. Does that factor in? Thanks.
Question.
I could just add that we don't do that necessarily in the report itself, but as we were kind of talking about ways in our breakout room about how you keep that document going after it's published, and you know, people are tempted to kind of tuck it away in a filing cabinet and not look at it again. Mm-hmm. One of the ways that we do that is to tie in the kind of the impact, the donor impact on the community service organizations that are addressing the issues that are featured in the report. And so depending on different themes throughout the year, or you know, that we might celebrate you know, the impact that's happening in education through bursaries and awards. We don't specifically tie that into the Sustainable Development Goals, but in essence we are. And you know, likewise with food security throughout the year, especially as we're beginning the school year in Canada, which generally happens in September, we will start focusing on food security and kind of re-engage our donors the work that those food security organizations are doing, reminding individuals, the public, that, kids are going back to school and maybe hungry going back to school. So how do we support them? And we do that through the report. We might pull pieces of the report and do that through social media as well throughout the year on our social media platforms. So keeping the report going, always tying it back into the impact that our donors and grantors are doing. And just recently starting a small opinion piece in our local newspaper, where we were able to kind of more of a spotlight on the community service organizations that are doing the work, so that if you are a donor and you're looking for ways that are important to you about the environment, or supporting Indigenous focus groups, or whatever they might be, that here are some of the key organizations you can go to without necessarily having to go through us, but these are organizations that we support and believe are doing great work in our community. So I think it can all tie back to your Vital Signs report in some way without being overly specific about it, I think, is our approach anyway. And we find that to be quite successful recently.